Hi, friends. Welcome. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to talk about the Pharaoh Akhenaten, and then reincarnation, and then, of course, Junior Bake Off. So let's begin. First, Akhenaten. Akhenaten was a pharaoh in Egypt in the New Kingdom in the 18th dynasty in the second millennium BCE. So let's break that down. Second millennium BCE is 1999 BCE to 1000 BCE. And then the late Bronze Age is 1550 to 1200 BCE. And then within that, we have the New Kingdom, which is 1539 to 1075 BCE. And the 18th dynasty also starts at the New Kingdom, so 1539, and then it only goes to 1292 BCE. Like I said, this is the late Bronze Age, and this is a period where the Near East is doing pretty good. We've got 5 major kingdoms, and they all seem to be pretty peaceful at this time. They're sending cuneiform tablets back and forth, calling each other brother, giving each other wives, and lavish gifts just to assure their security and their standing in the region. The 5 kingdoms are the Hittites, the Kassites, also known as Babylonia. Then we have the Assyrians and the Mitanni. And then, of course, Egypt. So let's go back to Egypt. Egypt, this is the most territory that they have in their history. Their territory extends from the tippity-tap of Canaan all the way to Nubia in the south. And this new kingdom is probably where you're familiar with. When you think of ancient Egypt, you think of pharaohs like King Tut and Hatshepsut, the second female pharaoh. And then we have Ramses, and we have, who else do we have? Of course, Akhenaten and Amenhotep. So let's go to who Akhenaten is. Well, he is the second son of Amenhotep III. I also wanted to tell you, 500 years before Akhenaten, we have the first evidence of an alphabetic script, and that's based on on the system of Egyptian consonants, and then they think it's in a Proto-Sinaitic, Sinaitic, Sinaitic script. That's basically one of the Canaanite languages from way back when, and it was at a work site near Wadi El Hol. That's El-Hol. And what else? After Akhenaten in 1200 BCE, so remember he reigned until 1336, so about 100 years after Akhenaten. These are when the 12 tribes of Israel are still as 12 tribes, but they think that they have a common ancestry. And then 100 years after that, we have them set up 2 monarchies. The tribal system isn't working anymore. So we're 300 years before the monarchies, 500 years after the first alphabet. And we have the Pharaoh Amenhotep III has 6 or 7 kids. He has an eldest son named Thutmose, who decides to not follow in his father's footsteps. Instead, he becomes a high priest of Ptah, Ptah, in the city of Memphis, which is about 150 miles from the capital, which was Thebes at the time. So he goes off and becomes a high priest, and he actually died before he could even become the next pharaoh, even if he had planned on that. So Akhenaten was next, and he was actually named Amenhotep IV. We'll talk about why he changes his name in a little bit. Akhenaten had also 4 or 5 sisters, and I'm not sure why there's a question about whether there's 4 or 5, but we'll let it be. That's fine. Now, Bob Breyer, who's an Egyptologist that has a few great courses on Egypt, great courses, I'm going to say. They are great courses, and they are great courses. Okay, so he says that Aken isn't mentioned. I'm just going to call him Aken. Aken isn't mentioned anywhere before he becomes co-regent with his father. And his father has, his mummy shows really, really bad teeth. And so one of the theories that Bob Breyer suggested was that perhaps the pharaoh had to be sedated because the pain was so bad, and therefore he needed somebody to co-rule with him. So 4 years after that, Amenhotep IV, as he was called, steps into power. That's when his dad dies. And he changes the country in three major ways. And we're going to talk about each of those ways. He's going to change the religion, he's going to change the economy, and he's going to change the art. It's exciting. Let's begin with religion. Okay, so in the first year of his own reign, he changes his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten. Amenhotep means it is beneficial. No, sorry. Amenhotep means Amen is pleased, and Akhenaten means it is beneficial to Aten. Now, who are Amun and Aten? Well, that's a great question. The capital of Thebes had a major creation story that centered around 8 gods called the Ogdoad, Ogdoad. And I looked up the pronunciation. That's pretty much what they think it's, what the consensus is for pronunciation, Ogdoad. So Amun was one of these 8 gods. In fact, they decided he was the best or the greatest of these gods. And in all things that are created come from aspects of Amun. They say that he is the god of hiddenness, things unseen. He is the unknowable nature in which can be contrasted with the tangible world. Amun, they said, was, quote, beyond the sky and deeper than the underworld. So in Thebes, Amun is a big deal. I think we can all agree. In the 16th century, aka 1599 through 1500 BCE, Amun merged with the god Ra or Re. Now, I'm not sure why there is 2 spellings, and I'm wondering if it's because they didn't have vowels in ancient Egypt at this time. I'm not sure if that's the reason or if that's just a possibility, but Amun merges with Ra or Re and becomes Amun Ra or Amun Re, whatever you'd like to say. Now, that means the god of the hidden and unknowable becomes merged with the god of the sun. Now, he's not the actual sun. He is the god of the sun. He's depicted as a falcon with holding the sun on his head. And he is said to carry the sun across the sky every day, and then he has to carry it in the underworld every night, and he has to battle all these things, and then emerges victoriously in the morning and brings the sun across the sky again. So this combination of Amun and Ra or Re happened 7 pharaohs before Akhenaten. So Aken's entire concept of time, I would assume, is that Amun and Re or Ra are the same god. Okay. So Aten, in contrast, is the actual sun. So Aken is the solar disk. It is the hot, shining, bright thing that gives us all warmth and light. Why does he change it to this? I don't know. Aten was a minor god, right? So he's not in the Ogdoad. He's not in the Aeneid. He's not in any major pantheon. He is one of the hundreds of gods that people don't really pay attention to, which is interesting. So he goes a step further than that. Not just changing his name to it is beneficial to the sun. He decides that Aten is the only god. Okay, thousands of years of history at this point. Nobody has thought that there might just be one god. Everyone's got a pantheon. Even the Israelites aren't monotheistic at this point. But he decides, this Aken guy, decides that Aten is the only god. So he's changing the religion of the whole country. Now, I'm assuming a lot of people are upset, and there is a theory that they ran him out of town. But more likely, in my opinion, more likely, he wanted to create a new capital. And he says he does it because he doesn't want a city that's sullied by some other god. So he wants a city that is dedicated to Aten. And there's a boundary stela in Amarna, which we call the city now, where he set up shop, basically, set up the new capital. And it says that Aten showed him this place as the city where he should build the new capital. Another thing about Bob Breyer that he says. So he has visited Amarna, and The hieroglyph of Aten is a mountain and then the sun peeking up over the mountain. And what's fascinating is that the view of this city is a sun. The sun rises behind a mountainscape. So it's almost like Aten showed him, look, this is me. Like you can see me coming up over this mountain. This is the place that you should build your city. 25 to 30,000 people follow him to this new city, and that's out of 4 million. So not a ton of people go, but a considerable amount. And these people are probably not the religious elite, because I don't think that they would just abandon their religion so easily. And it's probably not people who have a lot of land, because why would they up and move if they've got a lot of land? So these are probably younger people, more, I don't know, think of people who are into new religions nowadays. It's usually kind of like the downtrodden or the looked over, the passed over, the ones who the religious establishment has failed. That's who I imagine going with him to this new city. So Aachen is chilling in Amarna as this religious visionary, and he's writing hymns for the sun god, and they sound really similar to the Psalms. One such hymn says that Aten's light illuminates the faces of everyone, not just the Egyptians. This is the other thing that's just so wild, is he's not saying that this is Egypt's god, which at this time, all of the cities had their patron deity that resided in that city, but he's saying that this god is for everybody, everyone in the world. It's mind-blowing. So examples of patron gods, for example, Marduk is in Babylon, Baal is for Canaan, but Aten, this god, is for everyone. It's just wild. It's also interesting because it's the physical sun, but it's also the light that shines from the sun, right? So it's almost going back to this hidden and unseen type of God, which I think is interesting. So that's the first way. Okay. One of the hymns to the Aten is recorded on the tomb of Ai, who is a vizier to Akhenaten. It's essentially Psalm 104 from the Bible, but it replaces Aten for Yahweh. Isn't that wild? Can you believe that? Unbelievable. Okay, so he changes the religion. That's the first way he changes the country. Second way that he changes the country is the economy. So let's talk about the economy pre-Akhenaten. The temples were essential to the economy and the security of Egypt as a nation. So Egypt had a standing army. That means that these were career soldiers. They didn't have separate jobs and were just called in whenever there was a battle. That's what they did as their job. They were just soldiers. And so the way to fund that was that Pharaoh would go on these raids and gather treasure from all of the places that he's conquered. And then he would come back and he would divvy the treasures between the temple and the soldiers. Now, he gives first to the temple, which ensures the god's favor for the coming year. So in order to keep Egypt as a stable and prosperous and successful country, you need to give offerings to the gods. And the way to do that is to give money to the temples. So we know that Akhenaten has changed the religion. So what's going to happen to all these temples in Thebes and in other parts of Egypt that are not getting all of this treasure? Here's something that's even more interesting. He has no desire to go on raids. He doesn't go anywhere or do anything with the military. So these soldiers aren't getting paid. The temples aren't getting paid. This is one of the reasons why people think maybe he was run out of town. But I think it's more likely that he set up his capital before they got so angry. But who knows? I wasn't there. Okay, so we talked a few minutes ago about the cuneiform tablets that the 5 major kingdoms are sending back and forth. And they're calling each other brother, and they're talking, and they have diplomats that go back and forth. So there's one diplomat who writes Akhenaten 12 times and gets no responses. And basically the letters get increasingly, this poor guy gets increasingly more worried. Like, help me, great Pharaoh. They're starting to disrespect me. And then like, oh my God, they're coming after me. And then, helps, please send help, please send help. And then, presumably the poor man is murdered, but who knows? Okay, so he's just too busy. He's in the capital, his new capital of Amarna. He's writing hymns to the god Aten. Okay, so let's step aside from the economy. Let's just pretend you're a normal citizen living in Egypt during this time. It was so drastic that I don't know if I would have been able to handle the change, especially if I was comfortable. If I wasn't comfortable, maybe it would be a really cool, exciting thing. So we have changes in the religion that have a big impact on the economy, as well as him not being interested in the military conquests. So we've changed the we've changed the religion, we've changed the economy. Now we come to the last way he has changed Egypt, and that's art. So if you've ever looked up pictures of Akhenaten, pause this and go look at pictures of Akhenaten. Are you ready? Did you come back? Okay. So as we can see, the statues and the paintings don't look anything like the other pharaohs. And this is where a lot of conspiracy theories come in about like, oh, he was an alien, or oh, he's a woman, and blah, 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 blah. Because the sculptures of pharaohs before him and after him, they basically have two positions. There's one where he's got a foot forward and he's like about to smite things, or he's like sitting down and his arms are at his sides, but always broad shoulders, strong lines. The faces are a little bit different, but it's always strong, looking figures. Akhenaten, the photo or the statues are kind of curvy. He's got a little bit of a tummy. Some of them even have suggestions of maybe he's got some breasts. It's almost like he's like to the sculptors, yeah, do whatever you want. Let's be weird. Let's go in a different direction here. Let's try something new. And this is 3,000 years of the same artwork. There's not even a word for artist. It's just sculptor and painter. And basically the painters were just copying, the sculptors were copying, the painters were copying, but they even had a guy who would like create a grid with red paint of some sort. And then that would allow the artists, but they're not artists, they're just painters, to make the proportions all the same. So it's not what we think of as art today, which is an expression of oneself. This is just you follow orders and you make a thing that looks exactly like the thing, which looks exactly like the thing before it, and before it, and before it. So our little weirdo. I love this guy. He's got a belly, he's got wide hips, got a long face, he's got a big chin. We don't know if he actually looked like that. We have no idea. I don't think he did. I think he's just telling these guys, let's try something new. So he has these statues of him that aren't of him smiting things. It's just, him kind of just chilling, right? And here's another thing. The scenes in his tomb that are painted are not scenes of him going through the afterlife. In fact, we don't even know if he believed in an afterlife. The scenes that he chooses to depict, or he tells others to depict of him, are scenes from his actual life. So there's a part where you can see him and his wife grieving over a dead woman. There's one of a baby being held under a sunshade. And then there's one of him and his wife. And there's one kid in front of Akhenaten playing. And then the other one is like sitting on the lap of the mother, which is just unheard of. You just don't see that. You don't see that. You see they're like traverse into the underworld and how they're going to meet Osiris and how they're going to make it through to the field of reeds or whatever the the final destination is in the afterlife. It's just wild, and it's beautiful, and it's actually really heartwarming. So, do you know who he's married to? He's married to Nefertiti, as in the epitome of beauty, as in the woman that everyone thinks, maybe besides Cleopatra, was like the symbol of beauty in the ancient world. I just love it. Okay. After Akhenaten dies, a lot of people defame his statues, and they blot out his name and they replace it with that criminal or that enemy or the rebel. And there's two short-lived pharaohs after him, Smenkhkare and Nefer Uaten. The latter of whom we think is probably Nefertiti, because of the word structure, it's probably feminine. And then after that, King Tut, as we call him, comes into power. And what's interesting about Tut is his name used to be, here we go, Tutankhaten, and then he changes it to Tutankhamun. So from living image of Aten to the living image of Amun. So he, or the people who are influencing him, because he's still young, change everything back. He moves the capital back to Thebes, and everything sort of goes back to normal. But for those 20 years, everything is different. And everything is interesting, in my opinion. It's just, I think it's fascinating. Okay, so we'll talk about why Akhenaten is important in a while, but let's move on to reincarnation. Okay, so reincarnation, or transmigration, as some people call it, is a concept in many religions, or in sects of the religions. For example, it's a common tenet in religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. We have some Jewish groups, Wicca, some indigenous groups in the Americas, Druids, Gauls, ancient Greeks like Pythagoras and Socrates and Plato believed in reincarnation, as well as some spiritual sects of America in the early 1900s, like the Theosophists, and a ton of people today in the 21st century. So the idea of reincarnation is that there's a part of the body that doesn't die when the body dies. We call the soul usually. And this soul, instead of dying and decaying with the body, perhaps goes off and has a life review, and then comes back and goes into another body. And so then it lives again. So your soul could be very, very old, and it's having all of these different lifetimes. A friend of mine a few months ago was like, you know how time is sort of happening all at once? Does that mean that that your soul is living all of its past lives simultaneously? I thought that was pretty wild and crazy. Also the thought that like maybe you can be living this life, and then in the next one you're like a butterfly in Persia in 4000 BCE, something like that. That's also very interesting. So is there evidence? Yes, I think there is. And we get it mostly from children. And the famous examples I'm going to talk about include Susan Ganem, James Leninger, Dorothy Eady, and Shanti Devi. So Susan Ganem was an American born in the 60s who claimed she used to be a Lebanese woman who died just 10 days before she herself was born. She correctly identified this Lebanese woman's husband, daughter, and 23 other relatives and their relationship to her. So 23, 24, 25 people in total? That's crazy. James Leninger is the next one. He was an American man, he's still alive today, who claimed as a 2 and 3-year-old that he was a pilot from World War II. He kept having nightmares of being shot down in his plane, and he often drew planes crashing. And he always signed the drawings James III or James the Third. And no one else in his family was named James, so his parents thought that was pretty interesting. And after James told his father the name of the supposed aircraft carrier that his plane was on, his dad did some research and found out that that was a real aircraft carrier in World War II. And later, James has shown a map of Japan in that area, and he points out exactly where his plane went down. And so then, after a bunch of research, the family finally gets their hands on a list of pilots that were on that aircraft carrier, and sure enough, there's a James on there. And then there's also another guy that he had mentioned that was his friend. He's also on that list of pilots who were on that aircraft carrier. Isn't that wild? So this stuff, I mean, is wild. I just can't. To me, things like that, naming 25 relatives of somebody you've never met from Lebanon, these seem like pretty big indicators that there's something going on here. So the next example is Shanti Devi. She's a pretty famous one. She was born in India in 1926, and at the age of 4, she said that she was a reincarnation of a woman in town that happened to be 100 miles away. By the time she was 9, she had convinced her family that she was who she said she was, and they got in contact with the family and even allowed her to speak to her husband, quote-unquote husband. Apparently it went well because Gandhi eventually went and met her and did some investigating and concluded that she was legit. Gandhi. Okay, so here's the last one. This one's a little out there, but because it relates to ancient Egypt, I thought it would be fun. So Dorothy Eady, born in 1904 in England, she had a near-death experience after falling down some stairs at the age of 3, and then afterwards started remembering her life in ancient Egypt from the 14th century BCE. 14th century being 1399 to 1300 BCE. She spontaneously had a foreign accent and kept being asked to be brought home, quote unquote, and loved to listen to Catholic Mass because it reminded her of the, quote, old religion. So that was interesting. Once her parents took her to the British Museum, and when they got to the Egyptian exhibit, she was like, oh my God, this is my home. But these are the gardens, but where's the trees? This exhibit was from Seti the First. So when she was an adult, she marries an Egyptian student in England, and they move to Egypt. They have a son. She names him Seti. And in visions at night, she is visited by Seti the Pharaoh, supposedly, who told her past life story. So she wrote it all down in cursive hieroglyph script and detailed her past life, her mother's burial, being given to the temple to be raised there as a priestess and a consecrated virgin. But then she had an affair with Seti, and she ends up committing suicide. Her past life ends up committing suicide so as not to bring dishonor on Seti. So she separates from her husband in 1935, and she worked for some Egyptologists and kept praying and making offerings to the Egyptian gods. And she also slept in the pyramids, which is pretty interesting. I would love to do that if Egypt was different. Okay. On March 3rd, 1956, 52-year-old Edie left for Abydos. She set up home in Arabet Abydos, which sits at the cradle of the mountain of Pega the Gap. The ancient Egyptians believed the mountain led to Amenti in the afterlife. It was here that she began to be called Seti, because it was customary for Egyptian villagers to refer to a mother by the name of her eldest child, which we know she named Seti. So Abydos had a special significance for her because it was where she believed her past self, who she named as Bentereshet, Bentresyt, had lived. This is where the Temple of Seti was. She had made some short pilgrimage to this site before, during which she had demonstrated her advanced knowledge of the site. So one of these trips to the temple, the chief inspector of the antiquities department heard about her claims and decided to test her by asking her to stand at a particular wall painting in complete darkness, and then instructed to identify them. And of course, she got them all right. Never before had seen the wall paintings in real life. And it was in complete darkness, and she describes exactly what's on these walls. And then later, You know how she said that, but where are the trees? She was able to locate the garden, which has evidence of trees being in that garden. And she helped some other Egyptologists find other things. But it's pretty remarkable that she was able to note all of these things after having a near-death experience at 3. But who knows? There are obviously tons of other examples, but I thought I would just list a few. Now, why am I talking about all this? Well, I think we can learn some things through the life of Akhenaten if we take reincarnation seriously so that we can perhaps build a better future. I know that sounds a little silly, but I think of the United States as sort of like the New Kingdom. Now, we are the most quote unquote powerful country, probably the wealthiest. We have diplomats all over the world. We don't necessarily pillage to get treasure to offer the gods, but we certainly steal technology and give it to our military, and we take resources like oil that are not ours to enhance our economy. And we supposedly have religious freedom, but 63% of Americans identify as Christian as of 2021. And there's so much anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim discrimination that's happening. So it's not like a free religious area, I would say, or at least not everywhere in the U.S. is safe to practice other religions. So I think that the U.S. does a good job of making different kinds of art, though, and that's one thing that's obviously different from ancient Egypt. But I think we're pretty stuck in our ways religiously and militarily, and we struggle with wealth distribution as well as racism and keeping it together on airplanes and in the supermarket and just in traffic. Like, we have a lot of issues here. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I had to be reincarnated and I ended up in America again, what a bummer, right? I don't know if I could do it. It just seems like there would be so much more opportunity to have our souls learn and grow if our world is living and growing and learning new lessons. And so I want to try to create a new future. I know that sounds ridiculous, and I know that I can't do that by myself, but I think if each of us can find what we're passionate about, and for me it's ancient history and spirituality and mythology and psychology. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's making art, maybe it's making buildings, maybe it's architecture, maybe it's working for the government or banking or whatever it is that's that ignites that little fire in you. I think you should go for it. I think you should do it, because why waste this lifetime? I know that we kind of have to like have jobs to make money, but that doesn't mean that you can't pursue what you're passionate about in your free time. I know we don't have a lot of free time, but I think we can make some free time. What kind of world would I like to see? This is where Junior Bake Off comes in. Okay, if you haven't seen Junior Bake Off, it's like the British baking show, but it's for kids. And if you want to just pause this and go look up some clips, that would be great. Welcome back. Okay. So children have an innate sense of teamwork that I think we lose as we get older. Even in this competition show with strangers, they're like immediate friends. They're giving each other like secret thumbs up when they go see the judges, and they're like, "Can I help you finish decorating your cake? Can I help you carry it up to the judges' table? How can I help you? I just finished mine. What can I do for you?" Even though they're not supposed to do this, this is a competition, right? And you, ideally, the kid who enters wants to win, but they're not stuck in that. They're stuck in friendship and creating a good time for everybody. And it's that for I've watched a couple of these seasons of this, and it seems that way always, and in my own work with children, it seems that there's always this, like I said, innate sense of teamwork. So, also at the end, whenever somebody gets eliminated, they're not like happy that they're necessarily staying so much as they're like, it's okay, you did so good, keep baking, you can do better next year, things like that. They're not just dismissing the person. So they're encouraging, and then they're also in the same breath in just encouraging the star baker of that week and saying how excited they are for them. So can you imagine if the comments on social media, when you put out something new, whatever it is, whether it's a picture of your family, new art that you're putting out in the world, music, sculpture, whatever it is. Imagine if all of the comments were supportive as these cute little kids on Junior Bake Off, and if you have a bummer in some way in your life, if all of your comments or all of the vibes from everyone else around you, it's like, that's okay, keep baking, man, keep drawing, keep working at your construction job, whatever it is. I just think that this could be a possibility, and why not try to get there? Like, if you don't like somebody's art, don't comment. Don't worry about it. Just go off and do your own thing and encourage something that you do like. Or if you don't, I don't know. I think we can do better, and I think that would be a better way to spend our lives here, and hopefully allow us to not be reincarnated into the same drab old Egyptian world, if that makes sense. So, what else do I want to say? I want to say, let's be Akhenatens. Let's do our weird art. Let's make our weird daily lives shown to the masses. Let's make a new religion. Whatever you want to do. I think there's probably something deep within you that feels exciting, and if it feels exciting, it's probably something that you should do, and it's probably something that's going to benefit at least one other person. So go out and be an Akhenaten today, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Enjoy whatever weather you have, wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.